John, what is it when you think about these three words? Booze, gadgets, guns.
Well, usually I think of you, typically, but when I'm not thinking about Scott Chris, I have to say one of my favorite movie characters of all time, 007 James Bond, without a doubt.
Legendary. Again,
Legendary.
as we have Steph as our hero for this whole video cast, James Bond. And I know, John, you and I bonded, I'd use that pun, but really over this series because
Yeah.
it is so important to us. And I just wanted our audience to know that John and I have connected through these movies over so many years. And it's been such a joy to watch these with you, John. And I'm so excited today to talk about the James Bond series. And you had listed a quote that you sent to me that I thought was great. If you wanted to start with that one.
Yeah, it's a great quote. I don't know who said it. I found it on a random fan page. It just said that James Bond is a living billboard for suits, cars, booze, and exotic locales. And that really, he doesn't mention women in there,
Yeah.
but I think if you think about Seville Row, right?
Yeah.
Tailoring suits, like his suits, we think about all the James Bond suits, right? Even
Yeah.
even the 70s Roger Moore, which
Yeah.
cars, booze,
Yeah.
women, and this amazing locations. Can't help but think James Bond.
It's a part of our culture. And if you think about the one-liners in movies for the past 50, 60, even 70 years, the intro of Bond, James Bond, is just, it's global. It's a global
Yeah,
phenomenon when you hear the music, when you
yeah,
see someone in a tux, when you see that gun, or you see the Aston Martin, all these symbols have created this global culture, similar to kind of what Star Wars has done. If you think of another
yeah, yeah,
franchise that has managed
yeah,
to really communicate an aesthetic.
yeah.
But personally, I like this more than the whole Star Wars franchise. I know that may be sacrilegious, but I find it much more relevant in my life. And I'd like to, share that with you guys later on. But John, going to what are some of why do you think this series, which if you think about this, John, there's so many movies like Mission Impossible. There's been I think Jack Reacher. There's been the Bourne Identity. All these kind of spy movies. Um, but why do you think James Bond is so important to our global
Mm.
culture, not even British or American?
Yeah, that's a big question with probably a lot of answers.
Yeah.
But you know what though, I'm not a James. I will preface this for our viewers and our
Mhm.
listeners. I am not a James Bond expert. So
Okay.
anybody out there who's like a James Bond, like a complete fanatic, I'm not that guy. But I love James Bond, and I think the reason why, to answer your question, Scott, the reason why, let's just say the James Bond brand, if you will, because once you hear those dunna, like that's a brand statement. Like you hear that
Yeah.
music and you're like, boom, James Bond. I mean, he has all of his films of the James Bond series have gone through 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s into the 2000s, and he simply reinvents the character gets reinvented for every decade, right? And there's been some amazing actors who have played the role. I think the strong character actors that played these James Bond
Hmm.
parts have been a big part of the success because we've had some really amazing actors play the role of James Bond. But it's an amazingly fun franchise. Like every
Yeah.
James Bond movie is fun because it's amazing locations. It's this dude that's super smooth. He always
Yeah.
wins at gambling. He always gets the girl. He's got one-liners that are just incredible. There's always some cool gadget that
Yeah.
he has, like some crazy shit that he comes up with. Amazing villains in these movies that are
Yeah.
so good. These movies are just flat out fun to watch every
I,
single time, and you
I
always laugh. It's just they're just fun movies every time.
I totally agree. To me, it's I mean, it does have that consistency, which I think
Yeah.
helps. Just just it's almost like not a soundtrack, but the movie track, whatever of your life. I saw this as one of my earliest memories of movies,
Mm.
and it was every couple years we saw the premiere. My family would take me out, and
Yeah.
obviously this was during the Roger Moore time frame,
Yeah.
and but it was always something I look forward to. And
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, this drove me to do the job I do, to travel. As you know, I'm a single guy. I don't have a tuxedo, but I was obsessed with this character because
Yeah.
it was everything I wanted to be, which is fearless in moments of complete stress. I just was amazed at this character. And obviously, it's a fantasy, but it's real enough as opposed to maybe Star Wars characters in that setting
Yeah.
where there's actually something that's relatable. I'm not okay for everyone. I'm not comparing myself to James Bond. I'd be his lackey, a lackey. I'd be one of those characters that gets shot in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, that would be me. I'd be shot like in the first like 30
Instantly. He
seconds.
wouldn't even
And I'd
like
just
look
fall
at me.
aside.
It wouldn't even make eye contact with me as he shot me. But those were some of these
Yeah.
characters, and it was really interesting because it started off all from Ian Fleming's book
Yep.
in the 50s, based on his experience in the Secret Service, and the MI6, and all these experiences that he had. And he said that James Bond, what I think is interesting, is essentially an amalgamation of all the characters that he met
Yeah.
while he was serving in I think in the naval force.
Yep.
And but imagine him. Now, this was an interesting um, insight, was that his first kind of character of James Bond was just like a dull guy, and he wanted to give
Yeah.
him the most dull name. So he thought James Bond was a very Anglo-Saxon name, but very boring, almost like Peter Smith or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and that he's basically said like a dull blade, and things would happen to him and kind of shape him to become a character, as opposed to the guy who was kind of naturally smooth and articulate and athletic and all that. So I thought it was an interesting start to the series, like kind of its roots.
I agree because I have never, to be honest, I've never read any of the books before,
Yeah.
which is sad because my father has. My father,
Yeah.
my father was a big James Bond fan, so I get influenced by the likes of our parents, right? Whether it's music
Yep.
or film. And my father was a huge James Bond fan. He read many of the books. My first James Bond movie in the theater was A Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. So I grew up like you in the 70s with Roger Moore. I missed that last bit with Sean Connery. It was all Roger Moore. And yeah, I just find that his like I said, I find that the movie is just every time I go to see a James Bond movie with my parents, like whenever a new one would come out, like you said, my dad would take me, and
Yeah.
we get there early, get a seat towards the front, because it was the one film aside from maybe Star Wars
Mhm.
that I was always so excited to see,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
every time I knew it was going to be good.
Yeah.
And even when I was younger, like, and I wasn't really into like cocktails and beautiful suits, he was just a freaking fun guy.
Yeah.
Like James, you just want him I wanted to be like, I want him as an uncle. Like I wanted to hang out like Uncle James.
The
And like
Funkle.
he would take me skiing in Stad,
Yeah.
like in his Lotus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the guy I wanted to hang out with.
I think all the components to it, if you think
Yeah.
about especially it's like a dude's dream, right? You got
Yeah.
the cool car, you got all the gadgets. I mean, the guy is fighting in the midst of an African desert, and he's wearing a linen suit that's perfectly tailored. The guy never carries luggage. He never says like, "Oh, dude, I had some wicked curry. I got to go to the bathroom." And like, dun 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 dun.
Dude, he gets like, I remember, I love this scene in I think it was I'm trying to remember maybe it was in You Only Live Twice, where he basically gets buried at sea in like a mummy, and and they pick him up and they open it up,
Yeah.
and he gets out and he's wearing a fucking tuxedo.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, how does that happen?
yeah.
Like he comes out perfectly
It's
tuxedo, a little
amazing.
boutonniere. I'm
But
like,
I
James
mean, this
Bond.
is what the fantasy is like: no luggage, always tailored suits, the hair is
Oh,
perfect.
his luggage is always sent ahead.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
luggage is always sent ahead. Oh, we sent it ahead, Mr. Bond. Oh, thank you.
And I mean,
Always sent ahead.
and in the first like seconds, he's hooking up with a girl. Like there's no
Oh,
hesitation. So he's kind of
always.
like this paragon or archetype of every guy's
Yeah.
fantasy of what you want to be, right? Just
Yeah.
smooth. You got all the gadgets, you got all the travel and these. It's yeah, it's never in like, hey man, this is Fresno, California, the opening
Yeah.
scene. It's
He
always
never
in
he
these.
he never he never flew coach.
Yeah, the dude, I don't think he ever really flew in a commercial flight where he's
I
like,
think maybe he took the Concorde once, but yeah, he never like flew commercial.
yeah,
The dude
yeah,
always like had like a private jet,
yeah. There's
or something, right?
yeah, there's
He never
never
had
like in a fast food line where he's ordering by number.
he's never at Denny's like in
No,
Fresno eating
no.
breakfast.
And dude never gets sick. I mean, he's travel. I know I was a traveler, and it just happens to you. But it's I
Yeah,
think why, John, do you think it has sustained? I mean, it is one of the longest running franchises. It's made
yeah,
over $24 billion. I think it's the
that's
fifth on the
insane.
list, right? You have the kind of the Marvel comics, you got Harry Potter, obviously the Star Wars, um, and there comes the James Bond. But why? Because
I think,
you think with the
yeah,
changing times, it could be his character could be archaic,
yeah.
right?
I think with James Bond, they continuously reinvent him for the new decade. He's
Mm-hmm.
continuous, like Daniel Craig, who's the current
Yeah,
James Bond. Like he's the perfect James Bond for
yeah.
this decade,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like he's a good looking guy, like just well built, like athletic build.
yeah,
He's like, and I give the franchise credit for casting the right people, for finding
yeah,
the right writers, and leveraging technology to bring these amazing special effects to
yeah,
the screen that are even more crazy. Back in the 70s, the stunt guys were insane.
yeah,
Now a lot of it's CGI, but they really do a great job of always reinventing
yeah.
James Bond and to make him relevant, like you said, and to continually make the movies fun to watch and fun to go see. No, they're never going to win an Oscar. James Bond's never going to win an Oscar, but man, he's going to make a lot of money because they're fun movies to go and watch.
Well, it's really an indelible part of our culture, and that's
Yeah.
it's funny. I was in Italy last month, and I'm on the ferry, and there were these Americans on board, and I was kind of overhearing their conversations, and this guy steps off, and we're going to Portofino, right? This beautiful,
Mm.
and he goes, "Oh yeah, this is some James Bond shit right here." And it was true. I'm like,
It is
yeah,
true.
I think this is probably where there was a scene. There's the boats, there's the yachts, there's
Right.
pretty women. And I'm like, yeah, man, you're right. This is some James Bond shit. Like,
All you need is like a perfect tuxedo or dinner
yeah,
jacket, a
yeah,
cigarette, and
yeah,
a martini.
yeah,
And I mean, there's not one moment when I'm not in Las Vegas, like on the strip, like in a casino, not thinking about James Bond.
yeah,
Like I don't have a tuxedo on, but
yeah,
just that moment, walk up to like a table,
yeah,
like a baccarat table, and just like
yeah,
clean it out, and be
yeah,
like, oh, here's $1,000 or $10,000 for the tip. It's so
yeah.
James Bond.
Yeah, I would be like the character Jim Bondinsky, whatever, like cargo shorts, like playing at the cheap slots, that just
Yeah,
not even
yeah.
competing with him, but trying to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah,
Um, but
exactly.
some
Right
of the
on.
other components of it, for example, the gadgets with Q, I
Oh
found
yeah.
that so reassuring. And I think, listen, in today's world where everything's changing and things are just crazy and anxious, I always find Bond movies very comforting because you're going to hear the theme, you're going to have
Hmm.
a scene with Q. M's going to be busting balls, and then there's something very comforting about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe one thing why people like it. They like
Yeah.
that consistency.
Well, it's like going to a great restaurant, right?
Yeah.
It's consistent every time you go to a great meal. With James Bond, it's every time you go, and whether you go to a movie to see it or whether you pop in a DVD or
Yeah.
you DVR it or whatever you have, it's always going to be good, and it
Yeah.
never gets old. I mean, I can
Yeah.
watch James Bond movies all the time and never. It's like eating pizza every day for dinner. You never get tired of it because it's
Yeah.
so good. So these movies never get old. They're just incredibly fun. And you mentioned that the Q, who always, as a kid, that was always my favorite
Oh
part
yeah,
of every James
by
Bond movie,
far.
when Q would come in. There's always
Yeah,
some banter between the two.
yeah.
Between the two, I'm like, oh, destroy this again, please. Why don't you? But he always had the amazing gadgets, and that was my favorite part of the James Bond
Yeah,
movie, was seeing Q come in with all his cool stuff.
yeah. It's just a great formula, and obviously there were parodies about it, even
Yeah,
back in the beginning in the '60s. But excuse me, Austin Powers, all of that,
yeah,
which I think more it kind of makes fun of uh the Sean Connery phase a little bit, where he's and a little bit of the Roger Moore, where Roger Moore
yeah,
was a little goofy, like and we can go into kind of which ones we
yeah.
like the best, but I think it was those elements as well. You had Q, you had M, as well as Moneypenny. We can't forget her. Um,
No,
who was
she
just,
was
again,
awesome.
it's just a reassuring, there she is, and you're always curious. I mean, I recently watched the latest Daniel Craig ones, and there's Money Perry, and she's English but of African descent, and it's really cool because it wasn't cheesy. Sometimes I find George Lucas in the recent ones like, oh man, they seem kind of
Mm,
forced. I won't say American, but there is something with this English cool. I gotta say, I'm an American just like you, and I love our country. But even with the Queen's passing tonight, which was really
yeah,
sad,
yeah,
there is that British or English element that, just like,
yeah.
and all the bands I like are from England and whatnot. But I've always found that really exotic in a way. It would be
Yeah, I mean,
different if it was an American,
I
Jim
mean,
Badinsky,
James.
whatever.
I mean, Sean Connery could burp and it was classy. You know what
Mm,
I mean? Like the guy could fart and it would sound like
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Like it's just like the English accent, and especially with the Bond characters, is just like syrup. It's just
yeah,
so smooth and sweet that
yeah,
you're just like, oh my god. I'm from
yeah,
I'm originally from I'm originally from Chicago, so we have that.
yeah.
I'm from Chicago. Hey, how you doing? You're James Bond, eh?
Yeah,
Ah, James Bond. I love
yeah.
him. Yeah. So when you hear the English accent, especially with these characters, it's like liquid.
There's something about it. It's the perfect balance of that, like, kind of, it's not quite old Europe, and it's not quite
Right.
Jim Badinsky, the Chicago James Bond. Can we put my khakis on and grab a cocktail? Um, but now, as we go through the actual films,
Yeah.
because I think there's 27 of them,
Yep.
and there were six actors that played James Bond.
Hmm.
What have you seen, if you had to kind of like go through those, and um, kind of some of the major changes that you saw in the format seems to be fairly consistent, but is there anything that you saw in this series that you're like, oh, there's something different here? Obviously the
Well,
actors, the actors show.
yeah, I think each actor brings something different to the
Yeah,
table, right? Whether you're talking about Timothy Dalton, who I thought was probably the weaker of the James Bonds, Pierce
mhm.
Brosnan, who I thought did a great job, and
Yeah,
and of course my favorite, all-time favorite, Sean Connery,
yeah,
Roger Moore, and now James. I think each one brings something different to the table, right? They may
yeah,
be they're playing the same character, they have a lot of the same qualities, but there's a uniqueness that each character brings to their films that you can tell it's a little bit different, right?
yeah,
There is some of that. I think there's a lot of similarities, but where I just see the thing that I notice most is how each different actor plays that character that
yeah,
makes it special and kind of makes it their own, is where you can really see the difference in how the character changes his attitude, um, just the way that he moves. A lot of similarities in the clothes and the cars and the
yeah,
gadgets and the Bond girls. But then, of course, I mean, just to note the obvious, I mean, nowadays, now CGI and technology is
yeah,
crazy. So the stunts they're doing now in these Daniel
yeah.
Craig movies, like No Time to Die, I mean, you could never do that in the 60s and the
Yeah,
50s, right?
no,
The stuff they're doing now is just insane.
it is.
It's just gotten, the action has like been like turned to 11,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
To use a Spinal Tap phrase, they just cranked it up. And so it's really different. So if you go back and watch Russia with Love and then go see No Time to Die, a big
yeah,
difference, but the characters are the same, but
yeah.
the special effects and things get a little bit noisier.
Yeah, I thought, to me, as again, I think both of ours introduction to the franchise with it was Roger Moore,
Yeah.
and to me it was Octopussy,
Yeah.
and I thought he was super cool, the haircut, the suits, and everything.
Dude.
But I remember his fighting seemed a little bit wimpy when I
Yeah.
compared it to even Pierce Bronson or especially Daniel Craig.
Yeah, Daniel
Uh,
Craig.
and I thought, Timothy Dalton was, and you had George Lazenby
Yep.
in Her
Yep.
Majesty's Secret Service, and I thought he was cool. Like
He was cool.
that's the one
He
I
was
thought
cool.
like, okay, I like this dude. I
He was
like where
cool.
this is going.
Yep.
Um, and I thought really this Daniel Craig to me, if I had to put it, I said he is like what I would think a Bond guy should be. He's just tough enough. He's a dude he's believable that he could kick someone's butt. He's
Oh
also
yeah. Yeah.
suave, but
He's
he's not too there's not too much
yeah.
hairspray and going
Yeah,
on.
no, that's fair because he's much more of an athletic build
Yeah,
than the other James Bonds were, right? I mean,
exactly.
he's a guy that'll kick. I mean, he takes off his shirt and the guy will kick your ass. Like
Yeah.
he's ripped. Where
Yeah.
the other James Bond characters weren't like that chiseled out of stone, which I
No.
kind of appreciate that. I kind of like the regular guy, but
Okay.
no, Daniel Craig is like he's in more chiseled stone. Like I always like, to your point, um, there were some Roger Moore's fighting scenes were like
Yeah.
they were a little they were a
Yeah.
little they were a little
They were pushing it, I think.
they were pushing it a little bit, right? But yeah, Sean Connery was very believable,
Yeah.
in his fighting scenes. But
Yeah.
yeah, Roger Moore's fighting scenes were, mm, yeah, they were a little. Raj did his best, but
Yeah.
it was a little
Hey,
bit
it was
kind of
the
goofy.
70s. It was the 70s.
It was the 70s.
So,
Absolutely right.
so John, as we talk about your highlights and your personal favorites, not just the
Oh
movies, but
yeah.
what kind of scenes or what were some iconic scenes that you remember watching this series that
Oh
really
God.
touched you?
There's so many. There's so many great scenes that I love, and I have to. I'll just point out one
Yeah.
that comes to mind is The Spy Who Loved Me with the underwater car.
Oh yeah.
When I was a
Oh
kid,
God,
and he
that's
had
so cool.
that Lotus Alpine, and he
Oh yeah.
drives off the pier, and he lands in the water, and the woman is like, oh my god, and he's like, yeah, no worries, and he like
Yeah.
pulls it up, and like the tires go up, and this
Yeah.
comes out, and I'm like, holy shit, I want
Okay.
one of those. And
Oh
that
yeah.
to me, like and then even better too is the scene when they come out of the ocean and like they pull up on this like Italian, like in Sardinia beach,
Yeah.
and all these people are like looking like,
Yeah.
what the hell is that? That is like one of my favorite James Bond scenes. It just like comes
Yeah.
to mind automatically. How about you?
I think for me, it was actually a very poignant um, scene, and it was Q's final movie, The World's Not Enough.
Uh, yeah.
I think
Yep.
1999, Pierce Bronson.
Yep.
And it was the
Yep.
scene where he learns that Q is retiring, right? This is actually written
Yeah.
into the script.
Yeah.
And he goes to James, he goes, um, always make sure. I want to read it. He goes, and I'm going to read this so I don't get this wrong for our Bond
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah.
I've always tried to teach you two things. First, never let them see you bleed. And Bond says, and the second, and Q responds, always have an escape plan. And this is as he's being lowered out of
That's
view.
awesome. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
he passed away shortly thereafter. So it's this,
Yeah.
he was always this just, that was always my favorite scenes in the Bond when he goes down and he meets with Q and Q has this uh, almost like fatherly, you can
Yeah.
tell there's an affection
Right.
between the two. And I
Yeah.
thought that lineage and that was just such a poignant scene, and it didn't have anything to do with action or the love scenes. um I mean, I think one of the most indelible characters to me was Jaws, not the shark.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
That
think,
was
and
yeah.
that's what I think is a little bit missing from the newer series with Daniel Craig. There was just something with this, like the latest ones, the past two, Spectre, and No Time to Die. I thought the villains were they were okay. Like I
Yeah.
didn't find them like
Yeah.
so. Um, I don't know how to say, like indelible, like where you just like, okay, unforgettable, so unique.
Yeah.
But they obviously were
Yeah.
very well talented, very well acted. But I thought that one was like, okay, Jaws, like out of all the series, I'm like, that's my favorite.
Jaws was he was so good and so funny too.
Yeah,
Like
that was it.
Moonraker, he did such a
Right.
great job. Moonraker, right? I'm like it's true. Like there was these great character actors like Jaws, right?
Yeah,
And Q, where they had especially Q because there was this great like little banter between them, right? And it was a bit
yeah,
of a fatherly kind of
yeah,
figure, and he'd always like sort of scold him, and then
exactly.
James would kind of sort of like push his buttons every now
Yeah,
and then. That's what I think those kind of characters that had layers to them
yeah,
made these movies so much fun because you
yeah,
love seeing them again and again because they were such
exactly.
a they were I mean the Bond girls would always change,
Yeah,
but certain characters when they came back were just the best.
yeah, and it was just reassuring. There was something about that stability. And funny enough, when I was living in Japan, one of the most successful televisions, no, actually movie series, sorry, longest one ever, 50 some movies, is called Torasan. And it was
Mm,
started after World War II when
mm,
things were just completely demolished, and so they said they made these formats almost like a Scooby-Doo episode because
mm.
people wanted security, they wanted stability. And I think that's one thing that James Bond, I think, brings is that consistency, but more of a stability. Like, here's the character. Oh, okay, so this is what happens because everyone knows what happens. They're so much adventure and um, all of the crazy scenes, but James Bond's going to win. He's going to defeat the enemy. All these things, but there's something in that comfort of consistency.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, John, one of our last questions here about the music. So we know that the
Oh yeah.
scores are just
Oh my
phenomenal,
god.
and they
Oh
really
my god.
define the picture, right? 80s,
Yeah.
like for Your Eyes Only,
Yeah.
was I think
A
Shane Easton.
view to yeah, and there was like View to a Kill with Duran
Yeah,
Duran.
that's right.
There was yeah,
Nancy
and
Sinatra, You Only Live
oh
Twice.
yeah, and then there was
Uh,
Goldfinger.
that's right. Shirley Bassey.
Goldfinger. He's
Which
the
one
man
was
with the gun.
which one was your favorite? And it
Oh
could be
man.
within the movie as well.
You know, I for some reason the song "The Spy Who Loved Me."
Yeah.
I think that was Sheena Easton again,
And
who
wait,
did
no, The
this.
Spy Who Loved Me was Carly
Who was it?
Simon. I think Carly
Carly
Simon.
Simon.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, that particular song.
Yeah.
I
Oh, it's
mean, there's
she's
so many.
amazing. Well,
I
amazing
mean,
voice, man. She's an amazing talent. Yeah.
I maybe it was the opening and overlaid with that song. I
Yeah.
thought it was really good. I mean, the funny ones like
Mhm.
Goldfinger and
Yeah.
Thunderball and
Yeah.
From Russia with Love. They're so
Yeah.
like 50s and 60s. But the Spy Who Loved Me, which I think I actually have I have my copy here
Yeah.
of the Spy Who,
There it
and there's
is.
the car, dude. There's the
There it
car
is. I think
that
it
he
is.
drove in there.
I think it's Carly Simon, if I could say it.
Yeah,
1981, I think. Or
it probably was. I think that was Spy Who Loved Me was in. Oh gosh, that was.
anyways,
Let
I
me
got it here,
check my
but
notes. 1977.
1977.
77.
So,
Yes.
for me,
Yeah. What was your favorite song?
and this is it, and then I'm going to talk about this is an often forgotten movie in the franchise, which is in service of oh gosh,
Oh
in
yeah.
Her Majesty's Secret Service.
And
On
that's actually
in
a
1960,
phenomenal
dude,
movie.
it is. I tell everyone,
That's where his wife dies too.
yeah,
That's the movie where James
it,
Bond wife dies.
exactly. And this is, I thought, first of all, he was tough. Like Sean Connery at the end, I
Yeah.
think, he again didn't have that build. He kind of had the dad bod. And this guy was almost like a thug and cool.
Yeah.
And I thought he just
He was
didn't
like a
have.
hitman. He was good.
Yeah, and that's what I liked about it. And I tell people, they're like, "Which one's your favorite?" I'm like, "On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969," and it's got the soundtrack in this montage in the interlude. About halfway through the movie, they're playing Louis Armstrong. We have all
Yeah.
the time in the world, which
Yeah.
is referenced by Daniel Craig just on the latest James
Yeah.
Bond movie when he's talking to his girlfriend. And he says that, hey, we have all the time in the world. And in the background, they're playing some notes from the
Right.
song, like
Which is kind of foreshadowing his wife's death
yeah, and
at the end of the
it's
movie, right?
saluting. It's kind of, kind of paying a
Yeah,
nod to that movie. And I tell people like that scene when they're walking, and it's Louis Armstrong who's got just the most soul in the
I know.
world.
I know.
And that to me was such an epic scene that it seemed to be a little bit different from the format. But I tell people like that's my number one, and it still
Yeah.
is. But I got to tell you, like all of them are just. I really have enjoyed all the films. There
I
hasn't been
agree.
one where I was like, "Oh, what a disaster!" And I can't say
Yeah.
that about the Star Wars franchise,
No,
i.e.,
that's a
Jar
fact.
Binks.
That's a fact. I can say honestly, I'm prejudiced towards certain films,
Yeah.
but I've almost seen all the James Bond movies. Not all, but almost all of them.
Okay.
I have a few Daniel Craigs I haven't seen, but they're all fun. I mean, like even the
Yeah.
Timothy Dalton one, I mean, they're
Yeah.
all really fun movies. They never quite disappoint
Yeah.
ever. They're just fun. I'm like you. I never get tired of watching them.
Yeah. What would you say to someone if you had to describe, like, what does it bring? Like, if we took out James Bond movies from our culture for the past, 70
Mm.
years, what would be missing? What word would you say is missing from our cinema?
I mean, I would say, very simply put, you're losing going to the theater and just having a lot of fun, right?
Mhm.
I mean, James Bond movies, like one thing about James Bond movies, they're not going to scare you. You're not
Yeah.
going to laugh the whole time. They're these action movies where you are going to laugh. You are going to kind of go, whoa,
Yeah.
you're gonna, they're just fun movies. And I think without James Bond, you'd lose a lot of, I think about all the times I've gone to the theater to see James Bond movies since I was very, very small
Yep.
until I'm my age I am now. And I would miss the fun of the movies of
Yeah.
James Bond because every time it's just a good time. Like I get excited because I know that every single time is going to be fun. How about you?
Yeah.
What would you miss? What do you think would be
I
missing
yeah, I
in it?
think it's especially for me, it affected me personally a lot more than any other probably movie. To me, it was an adventure. And it was
Mm,
different from like
yeah,
a Lord of the Rings adventure or a travel
right.
movie. It was this sense that life is meant to be worth living. Like this character, James Bond, truly lives. It's
Yeah.
in the present. You never see him kind of thinking about the past or thinking about that.
No.
It is like he lives his life in the present, and it's a very, in some ways, is a mysterious character. There's a little bit of sadness. You don't quite
Yeah.
know his. They kind of will
Yeah.
release clues about his family and
Yeah.
whatnot. But the large part, he is this international man of mystery, and I think that's what they have brought to the world is this sense
Yeah.
of you feel alive when you
Yeah.
watch those movies.
And like you, Scott, too, I think if I had to add anything else to what I'd miss is just that like seeing the exotic locations that he went to
Yeah.
definitely was inspiration to travel.
Yeah.
Like seeing Istanbul, Turkey, and then going to Istanbul was a
Yeah.
big deal for me.
Yeah.
So going to some of these locations where
Oh yeah.
James Bond went to, was just fun to see. Like there's not one
Yeah.
time I don't go to downtown Las Vegas on Fremont and think about Diamonds Are Forever and seeing
Yeah.
James Bond go down the old strip.
Yeah.
So I think travel is a big part of it too.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, listen, everyone, get your tuxedo on, or for a
Yeah,
woman, get your
and
best dress on,
and
shaken,
I
not
and
stirred.
and I would have to say I'd be remiss without saying that we are merched up tonight in our
Everyone, take a
Steph
look.
Nation
Take a
gear.
look.
It's not quite James Bond at all,
We
but
got we got our own thing going. This is our
but
own
we have our
style.
own James Bond. No, we have our own Steph Nation thing going on here. But yeah, just wanted to call that out.
Yeah.
Scott, you're looking
Oh,
fantastic in your
thanks,
Steph
man.
Nation gear.
We're looking good, buddy. Well,
Yep.
everyone, hey, listen again. Thank you so much. Definitely feel free to shoot us a note. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us your favorite James Bond movie or scene or score, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
See you guys.